Ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, welcome back to mismapasion, YouTube's premier channel about all things women's football. And on the back of their humbling 6-0 defeat at the hands of Chelsea yesterday, Aston Villa have been labelled a club in crisis, as they have now gone 5 whole domestic games without a single victory to their names. And based on these different labels and assumptions and presumptions, etc., based around the team, I thought it would be pertinent to look into the team itself and to actually see whether or not they do justify the label of being called a crisis club at this moment in time. As of course, there is very poor reading based on the fact that they're tied at the bottom of the WSL table and the fact that they've not won yet. But is it simply because they're a poor team right across the board, or is it just a matter of there being poor circumstances surrounding the club, which is what we will discuss today in today's video. Now, at the beginning of the season, or even prior to the season, Aston Villa had done a good amount of transfer business as they brought the likes of Daphne Van Domsela and Adriana Leon to the club, and many people had touted them as one of the big teams to be the best of the rest in comparison to the usual title contenders like your Arsenal, your Manchester Cities, and of course the current champions Chelsea. And based on the transfer dealings that they had done, it looked like they were definitely gearing themselves up for a very good season going forward. But as we can see, based on the results, they have not had that good start to the season in comparison to other fellow best of the rest contenders like Tottenham, who are currently in the top 4 and are one of the early dark horses for the WSL title here, even though we all know that by the end of the season they likely won't be the ones lifting the trophy. But crazier things have happened, and this is of course a video about Aston Villa. Now, looking at some of the players that Aston Villa have brought in through transfers, we have the likes of Daphne Van Domsela, who is between the sticks for Aston Villa, Adriana Leon, who is adding to the attacking firepower that Aston Villa currently have with the likes of Alicia Lemon and Rachel Daly, and of course some defensive additions to their backline with the likes of Anna Patton joining in from Arsenal. And on the face of it, it looked like this was some very good dealings, as they were looking to just reduce the overall age of their squad and inject some youth and hopefully allow them to kick on and continue to build a strong squad for years to come. But obviously this has not happened based on their losses. And looking at their previous games so far in the WSL, there have been 3 things that have really stood out, at least from my own perspective, when just using my eyes to watch the game, particularly focusing on Aston Villa, of course. And the first thing that I noticed is that their defense is just generally poor across the board. The entire defensive backline is not very proactive when it comes to their defensive duties and in general just protecting the goal and their goalkeeper against the onslaught of opposition attacks that they do face in every game. Now, this can be counteracted a little bit when you look at the quality of their opposition. Of course, they faced Manchester United, Chelsea, and Arsenal, which are 3 big hitters in the WSL, and Liverpool were, I guess, a little bit of a big hitter, but pretty much on the same level of Aston Villa, if we're being honest here. And we can just say maybe it's the level of opposition that they faced, which has been a little bit over their reach in terms of quality on an individual level as players and tactics when it comes to the coaching. But that's still besides the point. When Aston Villa do their defensive duties, it is very passive and nonchalant in my opinion. One thing I'd like to highlight to just prove this point is if you go back and see the game against Chelsea and Liverpool in particular, you will notice that the defenders, they do not engage their attackers. They would rather quickly go and cover the mouth of the goal, and hopefully they just wish, I guess, in this situation that the attackers will hit their bodies and the ball just ricochets away, setting them pounce on that. And not to judge the players or anything, but that's not really how you should be defending, especially in this day and age where football in general, and not just exclusive to the men's game, has advanced to a level where you need to be proactive in all your duties, whether you're a defender or an attacker. You cannot afford to just sit back and hope for the best and just pray that just because you're standing between an attacker and the goal, that they just hit you and not just go around you. And unfortunately for Aston Villa, they do exactly that they just wait by the goal line and pretty much leave Van Domselaar open and prone and pretty much get in her way at certain points during the games, and she just struggles to do her job. And it's unfortunate because you have a very good goalkeeper in Daphne Van Domselaar, who is a cut above the rest. She's one of the best keepers in the world and in the league, and it's just one of those situations where I think the defense that is currently on display at Aston Villa, it's not really doing the job here. And if you want to look at the statistics to see if what you're seeing is going in line with what you're thinking, according to FBref, where I get all my statistics from, just such a hard word, but where I get all my statistics from, because they're very detailed and thorough to the point. Currently, Aston Villa are only winning 61% of their tackles so far this season. Of course, that is a very small sample size to work with, but it just goes to show that they're not doing their job as defenders, especially when you see in comparison to the opposition that they face so far, who are winning 70%. So that is a huge gap between Aston Villa and their opponents. And 10% may seem like a little bit, but in football, every little bit counts. 10% is a huge mark. And to see that this is the level that Aston Villa currently operating at in comparison to their opponents, you can see that there is a lot that needs to be asked for from the players and the coaching staff in terms of just shoring up the defensive solidity of the team in general. So looking at that as the first point, there's a lot of questions that need to be asked of the defense. And going on to the second point, we have their attackers. Now, again, going back to the beginning of the video, Aston Villa did sign the likes of Adriana Leon to help the likes of Alicia Lemon and Rachel Daly just add to the attacking firepower of the villains. And unfortunately, that has not happened. And for Aston Villa themselves, they're still relying very heavily on Rachel Daly's goals. She was, of course, the Golden Boot winner last season in the WSL, beating the likes of Stina Blackstenius and Sam Kerr and Bunny Shaw to the award. So it's unfortunate because they're still relying on one player to provide the goals, and she still has been providing the goals to her credit, but I think it needs to be spread a little bit more across the attacking front line so that the goal threat can come from more than just one person, because essentially opposition teams just know if you can snuff out Rachel Daly, there's pretty much no attacking prowess coming from the rest of the Aston Villa attackers, because we have someone like Adriana Leon who is very good at holding up the ball, but if you ask her to just shoot towards the goal, she cannot do it to save her life. And less said about Alicia Lehman, then the better, because she is, unfortunately, as much as she is touted as a good player with a high ceiling and whatnot, she has just not fulfilled herself in terms of that promise that has been touted of her. She is really just one of the big passengers in the attack, because just looking at the game against Chelsea yesterday, she had a good opportunity at goal, but she took too many touches and she quickly got swarmed and overrun by the defenders, and they were able to take the ball away from her before she could do any damage. So that just speaks to, I guess, player ineptitude, even though I do acknowledge that sounds a little bit harsh. But this is the WSL. You need to get goals in order to win games, and there's too much over-reliance on Rachel Daly. And even though the likes of Kirsty Hansen have also joined in, particularly from Manchester United, to help out, she has done her fair share in trying to add another level of attacking threat to Aston Villa. But whether it's because the opposition acknowledge her as a threat and managed to snuff her out as has been done in previous games, or it's simply a situation where she just hasn't really found her footing properly at the club, it's not really helping the attack overall. But I do have faith in someone like Kirsty Hansen to just help share the burden of getting goals for Aston Villa with Rachel Daly. But as for Leon and Lehman, just for example, I think a lot more needs to be asked of these players that they can do more and help the team out more. Because at this rate, if Aston Villa are not able to find the balls from anywhere else across the entire team except for Rachel Daly, then it's going to be a long and painful season for them. The final thing of note watching these Aston Villa games so far is that always throughout these 5 games they have started very well, front foot, and just ready and energized to just go and attack the opposition. But as the game continues to wear on, so does the Aston Villa team. They just become more flat and lethargic and essentially just limp their way to the finish line. And this is best exemplified in their games against Manchester United and Arsenal in particular, where the villains, they took the initial lead in both games, but unfortunately they did succumb to comeback losses against their respective opponents, which both games ended 2-1. So at first you would think it would be an anomaly because you would say to yourself they're playing against bigger teams, but when you introduce the other 3 games that they faced so far, it is the same theme. Even against Chelsea yesterday, they just suffered when it came to seeing the game out as it wore on. Now, I'm not too sure what the issue could be there. Maybe it's to do with the coaching, conditioning, and nutritional training that the players are receiving at the club. Maybe it's not up to standard this season. Maybe there's some fatigue from the players because, of course, some of them were on international duty in the World Cup and then immediately had to come back and play for their club. So that could potentially be a factor, but it just is a very worrying sign because, again, going back to statistics, when you look at Aston Villa, they have a very good amount of the ball when it looks to watching these 5 games and looking at the statistics, as they currently possess around 60 to 65% of the ball when it comes to each game. So that is a decent amount of ball time that they have, but unfortunately they don't really do much with it, as either they get too tired or they also do suffer from a lack of creativity in the midfield department and across the pitch in general, which just leaves that position being wasted. So I think there could be something that could be happening behind the scenes when it comes to conditioning and training that is just causing the players to just have a drop off in terms of energy and performance as the game wears on, which is something I think that does need to be addressed. Whether they're being worked like dogs during training or they're not getting enough to bring them up to a standard level against their opponents on the weekend, I'm not sure, but that is something that also needs to be looked at, because when you see the performance of Aston Villa prior towards their drop off in performance levels, they are a very good team. And again, going back to possession, they're able to pass the ball around, they're able to play out from the back and bring the ball forward and actually attack their opposition on a decent level. And it's unfortunate for them that they have unfortunately suffered these 5 losses, because again, their performances have been decent to say the least again. And even looking at individual players, Daphne Van Domsela, for example, she has faced a total of 38 shots and she saved 22 of them, which gives her a 58% save percentage, which just goes to show that she is putting in a shift in spite of the poor defensive actions that are surrounding her from her backline. And even going forward, again, they get chance after chance, but they don't have killers in that squad apart from Rachel Daly. You can't unfortunately rely on the likes of Alicia Lehman, based on the example that I gave earlier, and Adriana Leon, who just doesn't have shooting boots for one reason or another to finish off the chances that they eventually do get, because at the current rate, Aston Villa do have no less than 5 shots in each game, and if they're just a little bit more clinical, there would be a fair conversion rate to say maybe out of those 5 they get 2 shots in, and that would be enough to steer them to a few wins here and there, but unfortunately that's not been the case. So I think looking at all of these factors together, I think the majority of the failure lies in the transfer strategy that Aston Villa utilized to get their new players and to sell their old ones. Because it does seem that even though there are fresh faces at the club and etc., they are 5 steps back from where they were last season. Because at the end of last season, Aston Villa finished well and they're being touted to be a dark horse for title contention for this season. Obviously, that's not happened. They have newcomers like Bristol City who are sitting above them. So that just goes to show you that there's a lot going on at the club that's currently not being addressed adequately. And of course, that's put the coach in a lot of jeopardy as she's at risk of losing her job. And it's a little bit unfair because, again, I think the issue now comes to the simple fact of poor recruitment. And I think that is something that needs to be addressed come January, where certain players are brought in and are moved on so that you can try and salvage something here. So that's something that Carla Ward, the head coach of Aston Villa, does need to look at with her respective transfer recruitment staff on how they can improve their recruiting strategy in order to get better players in, just at very least to help them stave off relegation and to just go back to the drawing board at the end of the season here. Because I do believe personally, just based on what I watched, that Aston Villa do not have any right to be where they are at the moment. They have a very good squad of decent players who have the necessary tools individually and holistically as a team to get the job done, but for some reason or another it has not happened. So I think that something needs to change, and hopefully it's not the manager, because I do believe that Carla Ward, she is a very good manager, but something has to be addressed in the behind the scenes at Aston Villa, whether it is the training strategy to just try and get the best out of the team, because unfortunately they have a lot of individual frailties that are holding them back from performing at the best level for themselves, or it's just something completely different, like bringing fresh new faces to just help revitalize the squad and to address certain areas in the starting 11. One thing for sure that does need to be addressed is the midfield. As much as she is a veteran, the likes of Jordan Nobbs in that Aston Villa midfield are not really going to help that much for the ambitions or the proposed ambitions that the club may have. They need to get some midfielders, some fresh, new, young-blooded midfielders into that team who have a lot of energy and a lot of hunger to do well. And I think that will really help a lot, especially in bridging the gaps in the defense and the attack. So hopefully something can change, because again, Aston Villa, they have been a very good team to watch and they are an entertaining side, and it's unfortunate again that they find themselves in this position because they should not be there. But those are just my thoughts on it. Obviously, it's just based on what I've seen. As always, I'd like to hear your thoughts and sentiments in the comment section below. What have you noticed? Do you think I'm completely wrong? If I am, where am I wrong? Because I would love to learn. As always, I'm always open to learning and hearing new perspectives from you, the viewer/listener. And of course, please make sure to like, share, and subscribe as always, and I'll see you in the next video.